Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, August 10th, 2022. Today is Sunday, August 7th, 2022, and I am your host, Frank Wright. We are um, in the book of 1 Samuel, and we're in chapter 5 this week. We're going to kind of make a pivot. Up to now, we've been talking about how believers need to interact with the Lord and obey Him, and how holy He expects us to be. But chapter 5, God expects obedience from even those who don't believe. And that is something that we need to tell the world that this isn't just only for people who choose. God is to be respected and held holy by everybody. Now, he doesn't expect them to obey him in one sense, because he gave them free will, but he will hold them accountable in the long run. And if they deal with things that should be holy, he's going to still hold them accountable. Chapter 5, verse 1. After the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it down beside Dagon. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. They took Dagon and put him back in his place, but the following morning when they rose, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. His head and hands had broken off and were lying on the threshold. Only his body remained. That is why to this day neither the priest of Dagon nor any others who enter Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold. Every time I read this, I find it so humorous. Now, when Scripture here is referring to Dagon, they're referring to the idol, but apparently they had the theology that their God was the idol and the idol was God, and that everywhere they had a Dagon idol, their God was there. And God, they think because they captured it in battle, they've captured God, they've controlled God, they can now bring the Israelites to their knees because they have their God, and their God can't do anything for them. And then they start learning this hard lesson. God is not in his object. His object does not contain him. He is powerful outside his object. He's the creator of the whole earth, so the whole earth and all that it contains is his, and will ultimately obey his will. And so here is this idol that represents their God, that they claim is their God, and that idol worships Yahweh. They put it in the temple of their God, they go to bed, wake up in the morning, and the idol's lying face down like it's worshiping Yahweh. Yeah, as somebody who understands God, that's humorous. Okay, God, you're making the point that you're to be worshipped even by Dagon. And then they go to the bother of setting the idol back up the next day. The next night they go to sleep. They wake up in the morning and their idol is worshiping Yahweh again. Except this time when it fell over, the head and the hands broke off, and they're lying on the threshold of the temple. And that started a tradition among the worshippers of Dagon and his priests and followers that they don't step on the threshold because they wouldn't want to step on where his head and hands were. Very obvious symbolism that Yahweh is more powerful than Dagon, and that even when God has been displeased with his people and lets the people get defeated in battle and lets his Ark of the Covenant be captured, he's still in charge. He's still in control. And he's speaking a language that the Philistines should understand. And it should concern them very greatly. Because if you were scared when you heard the ark came into camp and afraid you were going to be defeated and now serve the Israelites, you have the Israelites' God in your midst. Maybe you shouldn't have done that. Verse 6, the Lord's hand was heavy upon the people of Ashdod and its vicinities. He brought devastation upon them and afflicted them with tumors. When the men of Ashdod saw what was happening, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not stay here with us, because his hand is heavy upon us and upon Dagon our God. So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and asked them, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? So they realize what trouble they're in. They know that God is causing them trouble and giving them tumors, and they have all this kind of trouble, and they want to get rid of it. And so they call a meeting. Now, the Philistines were 5 city-states that were in a loose confederacy. And as far as we can tell, each of the kings were independent and they had a territory, but they agreed that they had more common interest in their culture, and that with a strong civilization to the south in Egypt, and a strong civilization to the north in Israel, even though it's a confederation and no central government, they understood that the Israelites had this view that they were going to conquer the land and kill the Philistines and take over the land. And they knew they had more interest in cooperating together, and they had a mutual defense pact. In one sense, it was confederation almost like NATO. They can compete economically, but when it comes to war, they got to cooperate, because if they don't, they're going to be defeated, and they know it. And so they call this confederation head, the council, the ministers, the kings together and say, hey, we got a problem. What should we do with the ark of the God of Israel? I'm sure the other cities had heard by that point in time that Dagon had worshipped Yahweh, and they were a little leery of this. And y'all are having problems with tumors. The priest could hand wave it away. Oh, it's just happenstance, and it's just you're not really having tumors from that. It's something that happens every once in a while. It goes to the community, and it just happened at the same time that the ark is there. And middle of verse 8. They answered, have the ark of God moved to Gath. So they moved the ark of God of Israel. In other words, Gath, true short straw. It apparently had less political influence at this meeting than the other 4 cities. So it got short straw. Either that, or they had more chutzpah and willing to take on the risk or something. And so the politics, and of course the Israelites don't know the politics going on in the inner council, but they know the end result. Verse 9. And after they moved it, the Lord's hand was against that city, throwing it into great panic. He afflicted the people of the city, both young and old, with outbreak of tumors. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. So the second city, Gath, gets tumors when the Ark of the Covenant is there. So they send it to the third city, Ekron. And Gath has had panic because of this. I probably didn't take very long to figure out, the Ark of the Covenant came, we started having tumors. Ashdod got it first, and they started having tumors. Now it's here, we're having tumors. Get out of here. And so Ekron gets it. Middle verse 9, or middle verse 10. As the ark of God was entering Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, "They brought the ark of the God of Israel around to us to kill us and our people." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and said, "Send the ark of the God of Israel away. Let it go back to its own place, or it will kill us and our people. For death has filled the city with panic. God's hand is very heavy upon it. Those who did not die were afflicted with tumors, and the outcry of the city went up to heaven." So, as soon as the ark got into Ekron, third city, they recognized they had a plague and uh, tumors, and people were dying, and they're like, "No, no, y'all had that problem. Don't send it to us. We don't need this. We got to get rid of it. Send it back to Israel. Let them have tumors, or get their God happy with them, or something. Don't not us, not us." And they, they don't pass it through all five cities. Third city, they're learning the lesson. Nope. Hey, time to send it home. We captured it in battle. We've had it a while. Time to ship it home. Chapter 6, verse 1. When the ark of the Lord had been in Philistine territory 7 months, the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us how we should send it back to its place." Now, an interesting thing here. Chapter 5, it was always called the ark of the God of Israel. They didn't call it the ark of Yahweh. When they called the priest, they said the ark of Yahweh. They're beginning to respect it so much, they're calling it the correct name. They're calling it the name that they wouldn't pronounce. They wouldn't say. The Philistines wouldn't say Yahweh, except it's a curse word. But after the Ark of the Covenant has been with them 7 months, and they've had people die, and they've had tumors, and they're having all these problems, when they call their religious authorities together, they're calling it the right name. They're beginning to respect it. They're beginning to respect Yahweh and think, he may be more powerful than our gods. We should at least respect him by calling him the right name. God's teaching them a lesson, and you see it in their language. And they're so concerned about it, they're calling their religious authorities and saying, "Hey, guys, this is a spiritual problem. Y'all are our spiritual advisors. Tell us what to do." And this interaction is fixing to be interesting, too. It's a little humorous. Because as you see what they're doing, you understand their reaction. But chapter 5 sets up chapter 6. Chapter 5, we have the problem of the Philistine gods are worshiping Yahweh. The Philistines themselves are afflicted with things they recognize are only God problems. This isn't the Israelites causing them problems. This isn't something that is just naturally occurring. They recognize that diseases are from gods. And they are recognizing that this plague of tumors they have is from God. And so they're calling their authorities and saying, "What do we do?" Verse 3. They answered, "If you return the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it out empty, but by all means send a guilt offering to him. Then you will be healed, and you will know why his hand has not been lifted from you." Now, the priests, they still don't respect God. The priests are still calling it the ark of the God of Israel. They're not calling it the ark of Yahweh. They're not respecting God yet. But they've done enough divining that they know they have to send an offering to Yahweh. And they're that's somewhat to the culture. If they had captured an Egyptian god or idol and sent it back to Egypt, they would probably send an offering back with it, just to appease the god for sorry for messing with your property kind of thing idea. Um, but they know they're in trouble, and they know they have to appease this god, and you know, so they're proposing first off, send an offering with it, and uh, they want to appease Yahweh. Verse 4, the Philistines asked, what guilt offering should we send to him? They replied, 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats, according to the number of the Philistine rulers, because the same plague has struck both you and your rulers. Make models of the tumors and of the rats that are destroying the country, and pay honor to Israel's God. Perhaps he will lift his hand from you and your gods in your land. Why do you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh did? When he treated them harshly, did they not send the Israelites out so they could go their way? So they know the history. It's been 400 years, and it's still making an impression upon them to this day. They know the stories, and they know that Egypt was devastated, and that God, Yahweh, put judgment on their gods and their uh, leaders and their religious leaders and their army, and they want to appease this God. And their view is he's a territorial God because that's the view they have. And our God is here and their God is there, but this God in our territory is a problem. Okay, we got to get him back home. It's kind of where they're going. And they admit there's 2 plagues going on. They have a plague of rats, which is, of course, destroying crops, eating crops, and they have a plague of tumors. And the term tumors here, that is the easiest and most correct translation of it, but it basically was any kind of skin swelling that would go on. They had some sort of disease that was killing them, and it was causing swelling of the skin in spots. They didn't have the medical science to distinguish between, say, the bobos of bubonic plague and skin cancer, or melanoma, or you know tumors of subskin tissue. Um, they just knew that they had swellings on their skin, and they had a plague of rats and a plague of swellings, and people were dying. Some people have proposed that this was an early case of bubonic plague. If so, the Israelites didn't have it, and the Egyptians didn't have it, or they would have recorded it, and it apparently died out. And since it's over 2,000 years later before we see bubonic plague in the world, if it was, it's a miracle of God in that location. And by the way, when bubonic plague shows up next, it's 3,000 miles away and across major rivers. If you went around the head of the rivers, more like 5,000 miles, and through desert. Bubonic plague is carried by fleas that live on the rats, and the rats carry the disease, and then the fleas pass it on. The rats don't travel through the desert. They don't necessarily swim wide rivers. I don't think this was a natural plague. And they also thought this was Yahweh putting this plague on them. And they thought it's two different plagues. It really doesn't matter whether it's a bubonic plague or a plague of rats and a plague of skin tumors. You know, the details, in some sense, really don't matter, the medical details. They couldn't treat either one, um, and their countryside was being devastated. The rats eating food and causing problems was severe enough. People getting tumors and dying was serious enough. And they had this double plague. And they, they know they have to deal with it. And so they're saying, here, what you do is you offer an offering. Um, this is that magical kind of thinking that the polytheism of the day had, that the offering should match the problem to help cure it, and that offering an offering like that it makes a reference to should cure it. Um, since they didn't understand how to worship Yahweh, that's as good a guess as any. They're doing it in their cultural context. They don't know that, you know, you're supposed to offer a bull as a guilt offering and then take a bath in ashes of a red heifer that have been seeped in water, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. They don't know the Mosaic law. And even though they've been associated with the Israelites for a long time and had Israelite slaves, they haven't bothered to learn this religion, what it claims and what it asks for. And so, you know, they're doing what their culture says to do. And they're making expensive money. If they had 5 tumors the size of the tumors and 5 gold rats the size of rats, you know, probably about 10 or 15 pounds of gold, which is, you know, a decently expensive thing. I'm not going to say that was a cheap gift, but, you know, it would probably be a significant portion of the profits from that economy for a year. You know, this was a non-trivial, and possibly to get that much gold, they may have had to strip gold out of their temples and use it. And so, you know, the religious leaders are basically also saying, hey, remember what this God did to Egypt and to Pharaoh and how devastated they were. Get rid of this before God does it to us. We have 2 plagues in Egypt. They hardened their hearts, and it was 10 plagues. And finally, they forced the Israelites out, and now they're here. We don't want to face 10 plagues with this guy. We've had 2, send him home. And so, you know, the religious leaders are convinced, get rid of this. Make an offering. Each city needs their own piece of the offering, a tumor and a rat in gold. And since there are 5 cities, 5 of each, you know, kind of makes sense. Verse 7. Now then, get a new cart ready with 2 cows that have calved and never been yoked. Hitch the cows to the cart, but take their calves away and pin them up. Take the ark of the Lord and put it on the cart, and in a chest beside it put the gold objects you're sending back to him as a guilt offering. Send it on its way, but keep watching it. If it goes up to its own territory toward Beth Shemesh, then the Lord has brought this great disaster on us. But if it does not, then we will know that it is not his hand that struck us, and that it happened to us by chance. So they're still trying to say, hey, this is chance. The Israelites' God, Yahweh, is not that strong. He's out of his territory. Our God's stronger. And they're stacking the deck. Now, when this happens, they definitely know that Yahweh's stronger. They stack the deck in all kinds of ways. One thing, milk cows that just given birth to calves, and they're going to separate the calf from the mom. Cow moms are like most moms when they're nursing. They're not going to leave their baby. We talk about human mothers turning into bears if you try to do anything to their baby. Cows are much the same way. The farmer that deals with them all the time, if the cow thinks, oh, you're taking the baby over there and doing something with it, and I'm over here and doing something with it, and this is temporary, they'll get along with it because they know he's not going to separate them from their baby long term, and they're going to get their baby back. But they also said, take calves that have never been hooked up to a cart. Now, you have to train a ox, a cow, to pull a cart. It's not something it does naturally. And here they're going to put two cows that have never been hitched to a cart on a cart. And they're going to put their babies back over there. And if the cart goes to a specific city in Israel, now admittingly it's probably the closest city, then, that's Yahweh directing the cows to go up there and leave their babies behind. They knew that was not natural. And if God did that, Yahweh did that, then, this is from Yahweh. And you want to watch it go and make sure it's going there. But they also knew that if the cows wandered off from their calves, when it's time to milk the cows and feed the calves, those cows are going to make a beeline back to their babies. And they're expecting that this is going to be a failure, that you're going to hook it up and the cows are going to refuse to go, or they're going to pretend to go and then loop back around and get back to their babies, or as soon as one of those babies calls and says, Mama, I'm hungry, she's going to turn and go. And she's not going to sit there and put up with not going back to her baby. That's natural. And these priests know that, and they give the thing that if they don't go up this, preposterous thing, that they haul the cart and they haul it in the right direction and they haul it to the nearest Israelite city, if they come back to their calves, which is the normal thing that you would expect them to do, or if they don't pull because they've never pulled a cart before, then this is just random chance. Now, I think God put it in their minds and used their divination to tell them this truth so that he would prove once and for all that he was more powerful than their gods, and that he was more powerful than instincts in a cow and the maternal instincts, and he could train cows instantly to pull a cart, which human beings can't do. And that this is his work, and that they should be paying attention to him, and not saying this is chance. And so he let them build this impossible situation, and he's going to fulfill it. He's going to perform this miracle in front of them. And their priests are going to have told them, if it happens that way, then this is Yahweh. And if it doesn't, then it's random chance, so you don't have to worry about it. So God's going to take ownership of the plagues he put two plagues he put on the Philistines because they had his ark. And they're going to know that Yahweh is powerful, even outside his territory, that his territory extends to their land, and they should fear him. Verse 10. So they did this. They took two such cows and hitched them to the cart and put up their calves. They placed the ark of the Lord on the cart, and along with it the chest containing the gold rats and the models of the tumors. Now, something to note there. They made the models of the tumors and the rats. That's not necessarily a fast process. If all the Philistines goldsmiths put their mind to it, it probably could take them about a week to get it done. If they did it more cheaply and not on a priority rush basis, it probably took longer than that. So it was non-trivial them getting this done. There's been lots of meetings in this confederation among all the political bigwigs. There's been meetings of the religious bigwigs. Now, understand the Philistines, Dagon was their main god, but they were polytheist. They also worshipped Baal. They also worshipped Ashtoreth. They also worshipped other gods. Some of the cities had different gods that they worshipped than some of the other cities. And so, if you have, different religions cooperating together, it's going to take some time to get this done. In total, between all the plagues and then all the discussion and getting these presents done and getting the cart and the calves and the cows and all that, it took 7 months. And God's been heavy on them the whole time. And they know they're under the hand of God and they're having plagues. And they're desperate to get out from underneath the plagues. Verse 12. Then the cows went straight up toward Beth Shemesh, keeping on the road and lowing all the way. They did not turn to the right or to the left. The rulers of the Philistines followed them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. So the cows go straight up like the religious leaders told them to. And they watched it, and they went up to the border, but they didn't cross the border. Now, theoretically, they were lords of the land, and they had enslaved the Israelites, but they weren't willing to cross the border. Tells you something about how much their mindset has changed in 7 months after their military victory. They know they're not in charge. They respect that border. And they watch it go up to Beth Shemesh. And the cows, they're lowing, they're asking their calves to come follow them, but they're going up to Beth Shemesh because God's told them to. And they don't fight. They don't hear their calves in the background, and the cow on the left tries to go left, and the cow on the right tries to go right, or the cow on the right tries to go right, and the other one is like, I'm marching ahead, or she tries to go left, and the cow on the right goes, I'm marching ahead. None of that. They do it like they're trained, and this is something they do every day, and this is what they expect to do. Tells you something about them and about Yahweh's miracle working power. Verse 13. Now the people of Beth Shemesh were harvesting their wheat in the valley, and when they looked up and saw the ark, they rejoiced at the sight. So we know something else about this. This does validate what we said last week, that wars were fought in the spring, harvesting the wheat is in the fall. And verse 1 said it's been 7 months. So wheat harvest is normally September. Um, February was the beginning of fighting season. So this battle was early in the fighting season. They lost it. The Philistines have suffered all summer with tumors and rats. And the Israelites are busy doing what they should do, farming, harvesting the wheat. And they look up and they see the ark and they rejoice. They know what they're looking at and they rejoice that God has sent the ark back to them. Verse 14, the cart came to the field of Joshua of Bethshemesh, and there it stopped beside a large rock. The people chopped up the wood of the cart and sacrificed the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord together with the chest containing the gold objects and placed them on the large rock. On that day, the people of Bethshemesh offered burnt offerings and made sacrifices to the Lord. The 5 rulers of the Philistines saw all this and then returned the same day to Ekron. So they watched it. They watched the people offer the sacrifices, knew that they were, and from their perspective, appeasing Yahweh, and saw the people accepting the offering they gave in the ark, and they turned around and went home. And it's far enough to follow cows that far and then turn around and get back home. They were in a hurry to get out there once they decided to leave. Once they saw the sacrifice going on, they're like, oh, we're getting out of Dodge. We've seen it. It's clearly a miracle. Yahweh should be appeased. Let's not stick around and make sure that he doesn't put in one last shot at us. We don't want to stand around and watch him, put a third plague on us because we're standing around and watching. And they don't just leisurely walk home. To have watched the cows, even if they left really early in the morning, it's about 25 miles. It's most of the day to get there. It's late in the day when they watch it. Chopping up the cart and building the fire, sacrificing the 2 animals, and them, even if they just see them, slaughter them and start putting them on the fire, and they get out. It's still fairly late in the day. To do so is probably an hour or more of activity. And they've watched these cows go that far. And if they made it back to Ekron, 25 miles, they weren't walking. They were riding hard on horses, or they were running extremely hard. Probably riding horses. But horses were not a common animal in that day and time, in that part of the world. It was not horse territory. The Philistines did have chariots. The leaders could have been in chariots. And if so, they may have been riding war chariots. If so, a war horse covering 25 miles after walking that far is still a fair feat. Plodding out, following the cart at the pace the cows go, the war horses are not going to be tired. But coming back home, even the horses were motivated to get back to Ekron by then. They have the fear of God in them. They want to get home before sun is down. They don't want to be caught outside in the dark. They're scared. Verse 17. These are the gold tumors the Philistines sent as a guilt offering to the Lord, 1 each for Ashdod, Gaza, Askelon, Gath, and Ekron. And the number of the gold rats was according to the number of Philistine towns belonging to the five rulers, the fortified towns with their country villages. The large rock on which they set the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Bethshemesh. But God struck down some of the men of Bethshemesh, putting 70 of them to death because they had looked into the ark of the Lord. The people mourned because of the heavy blow the Lord had dealt them. And the men of Bethshemesh asked, "Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? To whom will the ark go up from here?" So even the people of Israel did not honor the ark correctly. They had quit studying the Pentateuch, had quit teaching it, did not know. Only the priests were supposed to handle it. They called Levites, knowing they were some sort of religious people, and had them set it, and the Levites said, "Let's take it out and set it on this rock." And God probably allowed that because Levites were at least helpers to the priest, and there was no priest there, and they were picking up the handles and handling it correctly, and they moved it the minimum necessary and set it on this rock. And he's probably going, "Okay, you're respecting me, you're doing it right, the villagers aren't doing it." But then people get curious. "Hey, what's in the ark? It's a box. Let's take the lid off and look." And they do so. And when they do so, God says, "No, no, no, you're not supposed to do that." And he kills 70 of them. Now, Bethshemesh was a town. It was not a big town. Best archaeological evidence says the town itself was probably about 100 people, probably probably about 2,000 people in the countryside around it on their own farms. We can assume for an event like this, everybody that was within traveling distance came, the city, the town, and the people in the countryside around it. So you probably may have had several hundred people there. But 70 people dying out of that several hundred, they're suffering a worse death rate than the Philistines did, because they should have known better. The Philistines, God give them some forgiveness, even though he's going to teach them a lesson, because they don't know, and they shouldn't know. They don't have the word of Yahweh. The people of Israel should have known better and should have been calling priests and going, "Hey, we got the Levites to set it off on this rock. Come take it. We don't want to leave it out in the weather. We, take possession. Do this job right." No, they're not respecting it that much. They're letting their curiosity take over. And it's like, "Oh, we occasionally get to see it and glimpse through the door of the tabernacle. It looks cool. Let's go investigate." And then they do what they weren't supposed to do. And, God's teaching them a tough lesson. He could have taught them a tough lesson by the first guy that says, "Oh, I'm going to look," and he looks and zap, he gets it right then, and everybody goes, No, God lets 70 of them do it, and then he strikes them down. He's making a very strong point that the Israelites should honor God too. The people who worship Yahweh should honor him correctly. He's made that point with the Philistines, that even people who don't know God should honor God and honor his things. And he's going to put the fear of Yahweh in the Philistines. And he did so. And 7 months he tormented them, and they knew they had plagues because of Yahweh. And then he proposes to their religious leaders this miraculous intervention, that if this happens, then it's of Yahweh. And it happens exactly that way. And God fulfills it. The people of Bethshemesh probably don't know all those details. It probably takes a while for the gossip lines to get back to Bethshemesh about what happened. But let's face it, there were Israelite slaves among the Philistines. They would have heard, they would have been in the back room snickering about it, and, you know, they would eventually, uh, some of them, get back to talk to their relatives back in Israel, and the word will get out. And but the people of Beth Shemesh should have known better, and they didn't respect God. And he killed 70 of them for it. And then they get scared, and they want it away from them. Verse 21, then they sent messengers to the people of Kiriath Jearim, saying, the Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to your place. So the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord. They took it to Abinadab's house on the hill and consecrated Eleazar his son to guard the ark of the Lord. Now Abinadab was a priest, his son was a priest. So they took it to the house of a priest, and they set it there, and they assigned a priest to guard it. Kiriath Jearim at least respected Yahweh enough to get priests to do the job. They didn't have enough priests to move it correctly, but they got it there, and then they protected it. They didn't put it out in public. They didn't have people oogling and awing over it and ogling it and opening the lid and all those other things. So they honored it, respected it. They also were bold enough to protect it. Now, it's another day's journey into Israel. So they've got it 2 days' journey into Israel now. And it's a bigger city. It's still not a walled city, but it's a big enough place that it can have some self-defense. It's a town, and has streets, and it has stone houses and adobe houses in it. And they honor the Ark of the Lord and honor it with priests of Yahweh. And they also were bold enough to take it and say, yes, we'll take it and protect it, and we'll treat it right. Other places probably got messengers and said, no, we're not touching either. Philistines had all these problems. We don't want it. We don't. Yeah, no, not us, not us. They accepted the responsibility. And so, you know, because they accepted their responsibility, and they did it with priests, not Levites, not Israelites, definitely not with Philistines or Philistine priests. Kind of been talking from God's perspective, worse and worse and worse and worse people to deal with it. God's going to bless them. And it's going to become a city in Israel that has a good reputation because they had enough respect of Yahweh to protect his ark. And as we go through 1st and 2nd Samuel, and as you read through Kings, keep up with Kiriath Jearim. This is where they enter the record. Before that, they were nobody. After that, they become a city of renown because they were willing to take on protecting God's things and trying to protect them correctly. And they did the best they could, and they put the ark in protective custody, assigned it a guard, assigned it a priest as guard, and protected it. And God blessed them. Holy Father, you are to be holy among the holy. Later you would say, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that your Son Jesus is Lord. We're not yet to that point where every knee will confess, every tongue will confess, and every knee will bow. Right now, it's those who honestly, openly choose you of our own volition. Jesus is the Lord, and he is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's Master. You are to be honored. Help us to honor you. Help us to be like the men of Kiriath Jearim who tried to do things correctly. Even if we don't understand correctly, have us to do better than we know. That you would have us to do what's right, even if we don't understand and don't know. And please forgive us when we make minor mistakes, because we're trying with an honest heart. Lord, however, you are going to be honored as God, even by people who do not honor you. Lord, right now we see in our country the plague you have sent us, and we actually have 2 plagues going on right now because people don't honor you and don't obey you and don't do what you said. We have 2 different diseases as plagues. We have a plague of violence in our land, which comes about because we don't respect ourselves and we don't respect you and we don't honor our fathers and mothers, and therefore we don't honor the government or respect the government or the government authorities. You tell us to give honor to who honor is due, to pay our taxes when we owe taxes, to pay them honestly. You tell us to support the government so that we may have a well-run and peaceful society in which we can live honest and holy lives before you and to worship you correctly. And in the past in this country, your people have honored you and the society at large has honored you. But today we dishonor you. We call evil good and good evil, and we set up our own system of morality and say that what we devise in our heads and our hearts is what's right, and some of it's blatantly wrong, like cheating employees and customers, or killing the unborn and saying it's a mother's choice, or that we don't have to honor you, or that our society should be religion free, that there could not be a God. Lord, even people like that are going to have to bow to you and admit you are Lord. But have us as your people humble ourselves before you and pray and seek your face and turn from our wicked way. That you would again send your Spirit through this land to bring people back to you in large numbers, that people would honor you and you would heal our land. But Lord, even if you don't heal our land, I ask that we, your people, be dedicated to you and do it the best of our ability. And that when we don't know, we will turn to your word and diligently study it to know how to do things and how to do what you want us to do. That we would be put intentionality into our understanding. And we wouldn't just pay attention to your leaders you've given us. And you've given us some good leaders among your ministers. But there are people who claim to be your ministers who don't honor you correctly, who don't try to follow you. And they substitute their own thing for your word. Lord, send judgment on them. just as you sent judgment on the Philistines. Have your people honor you. Have people that are not your people honor you. We ask this in Jesus' holy name. Amen. We had good worship in the Lord today. Oscar continues to preach some good sermons. We had a good VBS follow-up. I got to talk to one of the parents that I delivered their children's package to, and it's good interaction. Didn't see the other parents, but left the packages, and we know that they will be. I happen to know they were begotten because of the way the front porch was. The package won't be seen, but it'll be seen when you open the door. We are trying. We need to be diligent studying God's Word, diligent in trying to apply it to our lives. We need to humble ourselves before God. I hope to see you Wednesday night where we can discuss this more, and we can talk about how we should impact this society. If not, hope to see you next Sunday, and if nothing else, we'll see you here on YouTube. Y'all have a blessed week. Remember to honor God and have a godly